Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the sixth turn of the Shadowtech Goddess, subtitled Kat, Part 4, Chapter 3, The Thing in the Bathroom. Now, in previous chapters, I mentioned that this part of the book, Part 4, contained several chapters that were pieced from other books. These are chapters that didn't make it into the final edit of various books. Not because these chapters were bad or substandard or anything like that. They simply didn't fit in the narrative, in the plot. They either slowed the story down or sidetracked the plot unnecessarily, or they just didn't fit in what I was doing. But I liked the chapters, so I kept saving them and moving them to other places, to jump drives. I'd print them out and keep them. I've had to delete a lot of things that I've really liked. But in this case, I couldn't bring myself to delete this and other chapters. I just really liked them, and I just was hoping beyond hope that I would find a home for these misfit chapters. And this part of the book, with their quest to get to the demon in blue lights, Bella Thouser, these chapters were tailor-made to go in this part of the book and fit seamlessly. So at last, I could dredge up these things with a little tinkering, a little modification. They fit perfectly. And as is the case with this chapter, The Thing in the Bathroom. So in the previous chapter, Lord Belmont and Kat expected to see Lord Aram and Alesta, her angels from Clovis, but instead they got Aetha. Aetha said that Aram and Alesta were indisposed, off in some other universe, assisting other versions of Paymaster Stenstrom, and that she would be their guide instead. And she showed Kat an image in the Hall of Mirrors of Aram and Alesta as they labored to select her name from the list in the Library of Time. Kat was very moved. Obviously, Aetha is very fond of Aram and Alesta for a lot of reasons. She just finds them very agreeable and is working for them. As she said, in this particular universe, this is the sixth one, the sixth turn, the sixth universe. You see where my logic goes. In this universe, Aram and Alesta never met. In order to burrow their way into the Demon in Blue Lights horror realm that has no entrance or exit, they have to adjust fate. They have to affect lives. How that really works physically, atomically, I have no clue, but it makes for good fiction. So the first task that they have in order to get at the demon is to assist Lady Alesta and Lord Aram in discovering each other. And whether or not this task is actually vital or not, Kat even asked a question. Seems kind of like a wild goose chase, and maybe it is. Who knows? Maybe Aetha just wanted to help Aram and Alesta out. She has a good heart under that big glowing helmet of hers. Anywho, let's dig in, shall we? The chapter that I wrote, I think it was for Book 8, The Shadowtech Goddess. I can't remember what book I wrote it for. It sat unused for literally several years, and it's finally found a home right here in this part of the book. Chapter 3, The Thing in the Bathroom. Snap! The cool dankness of the Hall of Mirrors was suddenly swept away by bright sunshine and a throng of people. Stenstrom and Kat were standing on a busy side street. The sun, high overhead, was warm and cheery, tempered by a lovely salt breeze. The buildings around them were a tightly packed mixture of wood and stone facades, framed with modest windows and colorful doors, with hanging signs swinging overhead, heralding businesses of all sorts. Most of the signs were carved from weathered planks of wood. Others were made of metal, and the fanciest had a lettering splashed in 4D ultra neon, heralding eateries, notaries, bars, barristers, and other assorted well-to-do establishments. Narrow alleyways, deprived of fresh air and sunlight, twisted away from the street to places unknown. Across the street was a noisy cannery churning out fumes and canned fish by the pallet. The sea, a nice tropical aquamarine, went off into the horizon in a long line. Seabirds cawed. A long Barbary dock populated by small fishing boats, larger windjammers, and several starfaring vessels went on for a long way. A bustle of people came and went down the street in a steady stream, mustachioed men with oiled coifs and women in hats, coats, buttoned-up corsets, and long dresses dyed a multitude of colors. Nobody seemed to have taken notice of their sudden appearance. Kat looked around. "Where are we, G?" Her jumpsuit was gone. She was wearing a green gown, laced with a false corset and long black gloves. She winced and lifted her skirt. Ladies' boots with a heel were buttoned up on her feet, much more confining than she was used to. A lacy hat sat on her head, covering her blonde hair and her shadow mark with a crumpled veil. Stenstrom took in everything. "Well, it looks like Calvert to me. The fashions, the industry, the seaside, the buildings all mashed together. I'm certain it's Calvert. Aram's from Calvert, so it makes sense we're here." Kat scanned up and down the street. "Where could my angels be? They could be anywhere." Atha said she would bring them to us. Let's keep a sharp eye out. They waited out the afternoon, looking up and down the busy street, searching for the tiny Aram out of a throng of people and not finding him. "I'm gonna get a better view, G," Kat said, looking up the side of the building, 4 floors high. Easy. She lifted her skirt, staring down in disgust at her boots. After a quick moment, Kat, despite her boots, was standing on the roof, her blonde hair shining in the sun under her hat. Silver tech hooks faded into her gloved fingers. With Stenstrom at street level and Kat 4 floors up, they watched the area, looking for Aram or Alesta. After several minutes of searching, Kat excitedly called down, "Gee, I think I see him." She pointed up the street, past the cannery. "Over there." Sure enough, far down the street, scuttling from one storefront to another, was Lord Aram, appearing small and uncomfortable amid the people. He was carrying a satchel of unbound papers, which he pulled out, fussed with, and continually sorted. He slouched as he walked, his lenses big and ugly on his face, his tiny form nearly obliterated by the passing crowds. Kat came down fast, kicking up dust. "What do I do, G? What do I say? Now I know he's not a god, but it doesn't matter. I've longed for this moment, to stand in his presence, to hear his voice, to try to convey to him just what he means to me." "Just let me do the talking, Kat. When you feel composed, please jump in. Just remember, according to Atha, this is a different Aram than the one who assisted you. We both must remember that." "Okay." They quickly crossed the street, waded through the crowds, and intercepted him. "Aram," Stenstrom said warmly. Aram, somewhat startled, clutching his satchel and loose papers to his chest, turned to him. He didn't seem to recognize Stenstrom at first, and then, "Oh, Lord Belmont, goodness, is that you?" "It certainly is. You remember me, right? From the Seeker." Oh, yes. How could I have forgotten?" He blushed a little. "I guess we made a mess of things. I was sorry to see the Seeker go. It's just a ship. There are many more. Are you still flying?" "No, creation, no. I'm back in the mailroom at Fleet. I got demoted out of the Admiral's office for flying with you. It's just as well. I shouldn't have gone off like that. The mailroom's where I belong." Kat was invading Aram's space, staring at him with big eyes. Aram was clearly uncomfortable. "Lord Aram, this is Kat, the Countess of Belmont, South Tyrol, my wife." "Oh, well, hello. Very charming lady." Kat, enthralled, continued to crowd him. Ma'am, would you mind so much? I say, could I ask that you—" Aram was so put off he nearly dropped his papers. Stenstrom pulled Kat back a little. "What are you carrying there?" Just musings is all. No, nonsense, really. I see. We're here in St. Edmunds, Aram said, jumping in. Yes, in St. Edmunds, seeing the sight. Kat has never been to Calvert. It's amazing we met up today, but most fortuitous. Are you hungry? Perhaps we could press you to lunch. Aram looked on the spot and unsure. He fumbled with his satchel, stuffing his papers into it. Well, I was heading home to put my papers away, and I have actually already lunched at the Tin Brewery. I always dine there. Kat took Aram's satchel and papers from his hands. Let me carry your papers. I will take care of them, please. Allow us to buy you some refreshments. Aram looked to be in a general panic. Well, I thank you. I don't wish to be an old boot, but I think I'll take a pass on this occasion, my lady. Perhaps next time, may I please have my papers back? Stenstrom put his arm around Aram's tiny shoulders. Aram, I really would like to thank you for what you did on the Seeker. I consider you a good friend. You think of me as your friend, Lord Belmont? Of course. I'm very happy we located you. I've regaled my countess with any number of tales about you, and she has been most eager to make your acquaintance. So please, let us sit down, have a laugh or two, and indulge in a bit of nostalgia. It would make me and my countess very happy. You'll be glad you did. Aram thought about it and gave a bashful smile. Well, then I suppose I have a little time to spare. Any time you can give us will be most appreciated. Thank you, Lord Belmont. It's Bell, remember? My friends call me Bell. Ah, yes. Thank you, Bell. And I am Kat, she said. Please call me Kat. Thank you, my lady. They moved down the street, Aram shuffling along as if he had been kidnapped, continually looking over his shoulder and down the side streets, searching for a route of escape. Kat was very handsy with him, her arms around his shoulders, pinching his cheeks, even kissing him on occasion. Her attention did seem to grow on Aram, and soon she had coaxed several smiles out of him, even a genuine laugh or two. What are these papers? She asked again. Oh, stories I penned. Silliness, really. I'd love for you to read them to me, she replied. You would? He said, shocked. Nobody's ever asked to hear my stories before, and certainly not a countess. Well, today's the day, she said, giving him another kiss on the cheek. Several blocks down, towards the heart of St. Edmunds, was an imposing structure of turreted red brick, rising well above the flat-top buildings around it, casting long shadows. The building took up a whole city block and seemed like it had been pulled out of a different age and place. There was nothing seaside or Barbary about it. It seemed like a besieged fortress plunked out of the frozen north to squat on the streets of St. Edmunds like a brazen conqueror. Like a city unto itself, it was curtained with walls, towers of varying heights, turrets and battlements defending against an invisible enemy, all capped with steeply arched eaves sheathed in surreal patina green. A Terragrin sign mounted high above the street in flawless country green announced the building was the Empire Hotel. Stenstrom was drawn to the ornate baroqueness of the place as they fell under its shadow. This establishment seems like a fine place to sit and chat, he said. Aram looked genuinely frightened. Oh, I've never dined at the Empire Hotel. It's very expensive. Let me worry about the expense, Aram. Today is on me. Oh, well then I suppose. They entered the cavernous interior of the hotel, marveling at the grand lobby sheathed in fine red paneling, naked marble columns, stained glass, potted ferns, and towering dreamlike green, and other fabulous appointments, all spun right out of luxury's beating heart. It was like being on a different planet. The people in the lobby dressed in fabulous clothing in a noir style Stenstrom had never seen before on Cana. Revealing dresses, strenuously elegant footwear and netted stockings, feathered accessories, massive, impractical hats over ruby red lips, flawless white shirts under stiff, uncomfortable jackets equipped with glittering watch fobs. The list went on and on. Finding their way, gathering their bearings, they saw several restaurants inside the hotel to choose from, each garish and costly. Aram clearly felt out of place amongst the beautiful people there, often looking down at his scuffed, buckled shoes commoners wore. The people in this hotel seemed to be mostly wealthy tourists, come to Calvert to enjoy the climate, dress up and revel in this posh, exclusive atmosphere and gawk at the quaint locals, like Aram. "Can you recommend any we should try?" Kat asked, whispering in his ear. "Remember, cost is no object. You are our guest." "Well, my Countess..." "Kat. I am Kat to you." "Thank you. My uncle once worked as a chef in the restaurant yonder. It's very good, I'm told. Lots of light, lots of very good food. I've never dined there myself." Stenstrom smiled. "Then let's correct that. Ahead was a restaurant done up in rich woods, polished marble, glittering glass, and succulent ferns, all filling up a rich open space of light and color." Stenstrom approached the maitre d'. He searched his ledger, asked Stenstrom to sign it, and bade them to follow. Into the restaurant they went, each aisle, booth, and table a carefully executed study in finery. They passed displays of caged birds and bandstands of precise live music, until they reached their table in the round, backed in comfortable velvet, quietly perched in a central part of the restaurant. They were seated and received their leather-backed menus. As Kat went over the menu with Aram, Stenstrom looked around at all the seated faces. Everybody was proper and well-groomed, heads of hair parted and oiled, mustaches waxed, ladies painted up under grand hats and accented in pearls. And he wondered. This situation was to unite Aram with Lady Alesta. Alesta was a pilgrim of Marion, penniless, often shoeless, preaching an alternative news of the elders. Marians were often scorned and laughed at. Marians didn't sit in luxury in a fine, expensive restaurant. Atha had told him she would deliver Alesta to them. He comforted himself with that thought. Perhaps they would dine, gain Aram's trust, and then locate Alesta outside the hotel once they had finished. Perhaps she would be standing at a corner with her Marian fellows, passing out leaflets and other forms of literature to disinterested crowds. He imagined them approaching their group. Maybe Alesta would offer Aram a leaflet, holding it out for him to take with her tiny hand, and then that would be it. Love would happen between two strangers. That must be how it would go. Aram was clearly feeling more at ease, going through the menu with Kat, who would be struggling to read the fancy, long-worded dishes. He chatted about the dishes, offering his advice as to what to order, drawing on knowledge his uncle, the chef, had given him. As Stenstrom turned to his menu, he thought he heard something. The soft noise around him was the usual for an upscale eatery. Quiet bits of nearby conversation, the clatter of silverware against fine china, the occasional pluck of stringed instruments, and the passing of shod feet on the marble floor. And something else. He heard a pained moan, soft, buried under other sounds, but still audible and heartbreaking in its maudlin torment. "Did you all hear that?" he asked. Kat and Aram's eyes came up from their menus. "Sir?" Aram asked. "Hear what?" Stenstrom set his menu aside and stood. Nothing. Give me a moment." "What should we get you, G?" Kat asked. "Whatever the waiter recommends. I'll be back shortly." Stenstrom left the table, moving down the aisles, listening for that sound which had been so horrid he really didn't wish to hear it again, but could not forget or allow it to continue. Whatever had made that sound needed help, and he was going to investigate, offer help if he could. It didn't surprise him that nobody else in the restaurant appeared to have heard the sound. With the sisters' power, he often heard things only the sisters could hear. Their hearing was amazing. He moved into the darker, danker sections of the restaurant, near the kitchens, where everything wasn't quite so nice and polished up. Dirty dishes were piled on carts, waiting to be cleaned. Rags soaked in filthy water. Soiled linens lay in hampers. A dark corridor went off adjacent to the kitchens, going all the way to the back of the restaurant. People came and went from restrooms. Double doors to the kitchens opened and closed, accompanied by a momentary bit of light. And he heard it again, a pained, sorrowful moan coming from down the corridor. He entered, determined to learn what it was. The noise came from a door situated at the end of the corridor. The door was paneled in red, scuffed from use, with heavy-duty hinge pulling it closed. A shiny brass placard at eye level read, "Private." Stenstrom stood before it, pushed it open slightly, and peered in. Inside was a white, tiled room. Looked like a bathroom. From within came a harsh smell, like bile or the primal, sweaty smell of sex. "Is someone in here?" he asked. "It's taken," came a tinny voice from a stall. Bound by his manner, Stenstrom backed out into the hallway. "Your pardon," he said as the door swung shut. More sounds from behind the door, sounds of pain and animal-like fury, along with the slamming of wood against wood and the occasional slapping of skin against skin. And then there was silence. The door opened and a man wearing a dark blue Calvert suit came out, straightening his oiled hair. He had a sheepish, rather satisfied look on his face. He adjusted himself, reached into his pocket, and cast several coins into the bathroom where they rolled about on the floor near the drain. He looked at Stenstrom. "I'd give her a few moments to dry up," he said with a sneer as he walked away. Alarmed, Stenstrom knocked on the door. "Is anybody in there? Are you all right?" He peered in. There, emerging from a stall in a black lacy dress, torn and somewhat dirty, was a small, skinny woman wearing the ratty fur of some dead alien animal slung across her shoulders. She appeared to be in agony. Blood and other secretions dripped down her leg. She held the small of her back as she leaned down to pick up the coins the man had tossed in. Stenstrom's mouth dropped open in shock. "Alesta?" he managed to say. "Lady Alesta?" Standing before him, reeking of sex and dead animals, was a demented version of Lady Alesta, whom he had seen in the Hall of Mirrors. The lady he had seen was a beautiful, simple pilgrim of Marion, sitting with her love, Aram. This woman before him had crawled out of some hideous nightmare. Her doll-like face was smeared with cheap makeup, and she had been surgically altered in the manner Zaffin prostitutes used. Her right eyelash was 2, maybe 3 times longer than what would be considered normal. Garish tattoo of a demoness holding a rose was splashed on her left shoulder. On the right side of her neck, she wore a brand in the form of some Zaffin chaos symbol covered in splotchy powder. She looked at him, notes of misery and pain scarred around her haggard eyes. "Yeah, I'm Alesta. You here to see me?" She licked her lips. Her tongue had been enhanced. It was very long enough to easily reach the tip of her nose or the base of her chin, a demon's tongue. "I heard you cry out. I thought to see if you needed help." "Help? The last guy likes it rough, with lots of noise. I'm getting too old for this, I think." She composed herself, hiding the pain she was feeling. Her blue eyes came up to meet his. "I can be quiet if you want me to be quiet. I won't make a sound." Her demon's tongue wandered out of her mouth. Stenstrom stopped her. "I was hoping to treat you to a meal. Have you dined?" Alesta seemed genuinely astonished. "Have I dined? That's a new one. Listen, I'm a busy lady. Do you want to have sex or not?" "No, ma'am, Alesta reached into her bag and pulled out a jagged Zaffin dagger, her fingers fitting around the contoured handle. "Then piss off. Wouldn't want to have to hurt you with this, right?" The pain returned to her face, along with notes of unbridled misery and loneliness. "Go on. Leave me alone." She motioned with her knife for him to go. Stenstrom looked at her. Though she was disfigured and dripping with Zaffin paint, she still had a small hint of the characteristic innocence he had seen from Lady Alesta in the Hall of Mirrors. Staring at her dagger, he changed his tactics. "Put that away. You are a practiced businesswoman in this trade, am I right?" "Yeah, that's right." "You know how many girls would like to work this restaurant?" "Many, I assume." Stenstrom waved his hands, producing several Belmont sesterces from nowhere. Alesta lowered her dagger. She seemed impressed. She smiled slightly. "And what is this?" he asked her. "Money," she replied. "A lot of money." "Do you want it?" "Yeah, I want it," she said, her words stumbling over her enlarged tongue. Then I insist you dine with me, and you can have it all. Do I get alcohol? If you like. She put her dagger back into her bag. She processed this odd situation for a moment. Sure, okay, let's eat. Wasn't expecting a sick scenario like this when I started today. Do you want me to do something nice for you under the table while we're eating? No, I don't. Come and eat and drink your fill. Nothing more is required of you. Give me the money right now. Stenstrom handed her the coins. Her fingers were not quite straight as she took them, clearly once broken and not properly set. Okay, whatever you want. I'll be your friend if you want me to, she whispered, putting the coins into her bag. I'll be your friend all day long. She opened the door to the bathroom. Give me a moment to clean up, will ya? The door closed and Stenstrom waited outside. He wondered how this encounter was going to turn out. This version of Lady Alesta was a hideous ghoul in comparison to the enchanting vision he had seen in the Hall of Mirrors. And how would the much less worldly version of Aram, a man clearly struggling with his poise and confidence, react to her? Would they want anything to do with each other? He was reminded of the words he spoke to Kat and Clovis about her evil sister Wheel. Perhaps she was scarred too much. The door opened and out came Alesta, all the filth cleaned off her legs, a few notes of freshly applied perfume dancing about her head. She pulled the private placard off the door and stuffed it into her bag, replacing it with a similar placard reading, Ladies. All right, let's do this, she said. I'm your friend for the day. He took her hand and led her out of the corridor. I'll be your friend forever, he replied. Great, she said, walking with him. That's great. They moved through the restaurant, leaving the darker kitchen area for the brighter, more genteel areas towards the front. Alesta's mask of indifferent confidence wavered a little, as if the dark, seedy environments of the kitchen area were her established domain and natural habitat, while the brighter, lacy regions of the front of the restaurant were a jazz-gilded fairyland, forbidden and unknown to her. She gripped his hand a little harder, looking for comfort. Their table was just ahead, situated in a semicircular ferny nook. Drinks had been served. The stemware sweated on the tablecloth. Kat had fully cracked Aram's bashful shell. They sat side by side, laughing warmly, sipping from their glasses together as he regaled her with witty stories of his lowly job at the fleet, and of flying on the Seeker, which clearly had been the most adventurous situation of his life to date. Satchel open, he shared his papers with her, reading from them. Aram, the other Aram, had told Stenstrom in the Belmont Gardens that he wasn't much of a storyteller, but this version of Aram seemed adept at it. Once he was at ease enough to be himself. Kat was clearly relishing his stories, like a daughter listening to a beloved father speak. They saw Stenstrom and Alesta approach and stood. Kat saw Alesta, despite her augmentations, her eyelash, her tattoos, the serpent-like tongue lurking in her mouth, was elated. "Hi!" she cried, open-mouthed with joy. Alesta's reaction in turn was far from gracious. "What is this?" she hissed, seeing Aram and Kat. She glanced up at Stenstrom. "You are some kind of kinky bastard, aren't you? I actually thought for a moment you really did just want to have dinner with me. But this? A four-way? Right out in the open where everybody's eating? Now kick me out of here." "As I told you, dinner and nothing else is all I'm expecting," Stenstrom said. She was skeptical. "All right, you need me to hold down a chair for you, then fine. Let's get some good stuff over here and keep it coming." Stenstrom began the introductions. "Kat, Lord Aram, may I introduce Lady Alesta of, I'm sorry, where are you from?" he asked, genuinely not knowing. "From hell," she replied, seating herself. "So who have we here?" She looked at Kat and spoke in a lurid voice. "Listen, babe, this is my area, okay? I pay the proprietor to have this place all to myself, so take your shit and blow." Kat was too stunned to answer. She had been expecting one of the angels of her dreams, and got something quite the opposite. Stenstrom jumped in. "Kat is my countess, you needn't fear." Alesta turned to Aram. She looked him up and down. "Who's this guy?" Aram spoke in a hesitant voice. I'm Lord Aram, seventh of my line. I come from this city." Alesta sneered. "Yeah, the city stinks." She pointed at his thick lenses. You got something on your face. Just there. Aram blushed and removed his lenses. All of the progress Kat had made bringing him out of his shell was lost. He slumped in his seat, stuffed his papers back into his satchel, and hid behind his menu. That wasn't very nice, Kat said. I'm not a very nice person. Alesta pointed at Aram's satchel. What are those? Nothing, he whispered. What was that? She demanded. None of your business, Kat said, jumping in. The waiter came and they ordered. Alesta appeared to have a large appetite and ordered several entrees and drank spirits in shocking quantities. Aram, eyes downcast, quietly ordered something light. As the meal progressed, Alesta was harsh and rather cruel, seeming to enjoy prodding and insulting Aram. Kat recovered from her initial shock and disappointment. She was very protective of him, trading barbs with Alesta, the two of them nearly coming to blows. Alesta produced her ugly, jagged dagger. Kat raised her hands, ready to form her silver-tech claws. Stenstrom stood. Kat, a word, please. Kat pushed her chair out. Be right back, she said to Aram, kissing him on the cheek. The two of them walked away from the table into a mirrored smoking alcove nearby. I don't like her, Kat said. Where's the angel I love? Where's the color of mercy? Seems life has been hard on her, Stenstrom said. I won't stand for Lord Aram to be belittled by that creature. I don't think this is gonna work, G. Sure it will, came Atha's voice. Suddenly, Stenstrom and Kat were back in the dank mustiness of the Hall of Mirrors, Atha standing nearby, purple visor glowing. Kat was back in her green jumpsuit, blessedly free of her boots. In the node, they could see the interior of the restaurant. Aram and Alesta uncomfortably sitting at the table opposite each other. Aram was looking around for Kat, for the security she had offered him. Alone, he had nothing to shield him from Alesta's caustic wrath. Why are we back here again? Kat asked, a bit of distress in her voice. I need to get back there. I need to protect him. From what? Atha asked. From her. She's a beast. A beast? That is Lady Alesta. All the potential the one who helped you had, she also has. I was watching. You were babying him too much. Lord Aram needs to stand on his own, as any man would. Stenstrom was also concerned. I need to get back there as well. Aram doesn't have enough to pay for the meal. I told him it was on me, and I don't want to see him end up in legal trouble over this. I hope you're not going to make a liar out of me. You gave Alesta plenty of money, more than enough to pay. But I don't see her spending it in this case. Why would she? Please, let me go back there at least to give him some money. Atha shook her head. Can't. We're trying to scratch a hole into Bellathauser's horror realm. This is how we do it. I also don't think the two of you are giving Alesta enough credit. You're judging her entirely on what you see on the surface. Look a little deeper and have a bit of faith. Aram and Alesta taught me that. Kat stared into the node, wringing her hands, seeing the aggressive Alesta and the shy Aram sitting at the table. They talked. Aram put his protective menu down. He seemed to tire of Alesta's insults and fired back. They were arguing. Alesta stood, snatching up his satchel and dumping the papers within to the floor. She threw her linen napkin at him and marched from the table. All his stories. What a soulless woman. I'm glad she's leaving. She doesn't deserve him, Kat said. They could see Alesta as she walked away. She moved into the alcove where they themselves had stood. She was looking right into the node. Can she see us? Stenstrom asked. No, Atha replied. All she sees is a mirror. Alesta stared into the mirror, unaware they were watching her. She looked at herself, at her tired, painted face, at the elongated eyelash. Her tongue seemed big and uncomfortable in her mouth. She hid nothing. She seemed dismal and miserable, ashamed of her existence and so very tired. One of Aram's papers that she had scattered had drifted near her feet. She picked it up and glanced at the writing. Eyes moving across the page, she read further. A small smile crossed her lips as she read. She looked back at the table, seeing Aram scuttle around trying to recover his papers, and seemed to come to some sort of internal decision. Alesta opened her bag and took out her dagger. She regarded it in her hand. The jagged blade, the holes in the grip where she could insert her fingers and punch with it. A very ugly dagger. matching her very ugly life in one hand, a paper containing whimsical tales of love and adventure written by a romantic little man in the other. She put the dagger aside, hiding it within the branches of a nearby potted plant, and left it there. Paper in hand, she turned and went back to the table. She said a few words to Aram. He listened, looking up at her. From her gestures and body language, Alesta seemed to be apologetic, offering him some measure of conciliation. She knelt down and helped him collect the papers. When he had them all, he stood and pulled out a chair and seated her. Stenstrom and Kat watched with growing interest as the pair continued their meal, engaged in conversation, Alesta frequently covering her mouth so Aram wouldn't see the demon's tongue. Bits of the jolly fellow, full of wit and charm that Kat had coaxed out of him and Alesta had brutally beat back in, returned. He told her stories. As Kat had enjoyed his stories, so too did Alesta. She laughed and apparently shared a few of her own. Stenstrom and Kat watched them eat, daytime fading into early evening, Alesta now drinking coffee instead of spirits. When the meal was over, the waiter came with the bill. Aram squirmed in his seat. When he turned his empty pockets out, Alesta reached into her bag and paid with the money Stenstrom had given her. The meal over, they stood and walked away from the table. The node faded to dark. Red in the face, Kat put her arms around Stenstrom. "I really liked him, G," she sobbed. "After I got him talking, he was everything I hoped he'd be. He feels like a father to me. I want him to be happy. You think we can have him over at the manor sometime? I want to hear more of his stories. I want to make sure he's all right." "Without question, love." Aethys seemed rather touched by all this. Well, I think they're going to be happy. Look what we witnessed, the small beginnings of two people falling in love." Aram was struggling to discover and assert himself, and Alesta's heart was buried under a whole lot of ugliness, but it was still there, just waiting for the right person to uncover it. "I think they're going to be fine. I think tomorrow for them is going to be a better day." Kat wiped away a tear and nodded. She took Stenstrom's hand and kissed it. "Okay, we're off to a great start. Now things get just a little bit tougher. Let's go," Aethys said. And with that, we conclude Part 4, Chapter 3, The Thing in the Bathroom. And I had written in a previous book where in another universe, Lady Alesta, who's always a very proper lady, a pilgrim of Marion, very enchanting, very kind and giving, is a filthy prostitute who, though she has a lot of ugliness to her as she's lived a hard life, still has that characteristic heart deep within that just needs to be uncovered. And then she can be the kind, smiling person that she is in the universe that we know from previous stories. And I had written that sort of as like a side quest, but it just didn't fit in Book 8. But here it fits just fine in regards to this quest that they're on to make their way to the demon in blue lights. I finally got to have my cake and eat it too. I got to keep this chapter that I really liked, and I think it fits well in the narrative of the story. They will eventually be in love. I have in future Kat stories, and I'm planning on writing follow up with those two, see how they're doing. I picture Lady Alesta and Aram having taken up a relationship. She gives up being a prostitute, and Aram becomes a full-time journalist and writer. Alesta has her demon's tongue removed surgically, which is good. Her eyelash is back to normal. She kept the tattoo of the demoness holding the rose because she liked it. That's one of the scenes I have in my head where she just, I just like this tattoo, and that's fine. So all is well, looks like. Off to a great start, but things start to get just a little bit tougher going forward. The next chapter, Part 4, Chapter 4, Adomunjan and Melazar of Caroline. The quest to come to grips with the demon in blue lights continues, and this quest that they're about to go on is a lot tougher than the previous one. And here we run into the quandary I had where I had taken away all of Kat's skills but then needed them back. next chapter we address that problem, and we'll see what you think of my solution for giving Kat her power back. But that is next week. Hope you enjoyed the thing in the bathroom. Hope you liked it as much as I did writing it. It's one of my favorite chapters that I've ever written. I just like it. It just felt good, and I'm ecstatic that I finally got to use it. Anywho, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.